We have Roland Watier of Union, who has a way too long a resume for me to convey it, but he has a long and interesting career. He served for over 10 years in the U.S. Navy, is a renowned wood and other types of carving. He's a social activist and a well-known Maine storyteller. Please welcome Roland Watier.
This is what is known as a big story. In your life, you're lucky if you live through one big story. Combat Navy, and so subsequently I've lived through two really big, maybe three big stories in that regard, and then a couple of others. And I never really considered myself to be an adrenaline junkie. The last time I wore this particular garment that you saw me put on, it was the day before my big story. We are all from different historical points in time, that moment that seizes us and traps us into its energy. And the storytellers here tonight have all proved that. So this story is called All the Head Full. And essentially I was drafted, like most men my age, I'm 70, on the 13th of January, 65. I went to boot camp, photographic intelligence school at Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado for a year, with admirals and generals and colonels and air persons like myself. Then I was assigned a Light Photron 63, an RF-8 outfit based at Fightertown, NAS Miramar, California. And in that capacity, I went to chemical warfare schools because I was an intelligence analyst, and to firefighting school, for which I am eternally grateful. 26 May, we departed San Diego on the Oriskany, Det Gulf it was called, and we arrived at Waikiki Beach. Now, prior to leaving port, I was best friends. You know that time when you make your first best friend that had nothing to do with your church or your community or anything? Well, Ed Dilks was that kind of best friend. And I will show my wounds, don't worry about it. We arrived in Waikiki, and 4-part duty. So lucky me, I had the duty, and we were only in for one day and part of that night to leave the next day. I had the watch, and I'm back there on the gangplank, and all of a sudden at about 10 o'clock at night, guys start coming back in droves. And we said, well, what's going on? Then a mutual friend came up the gangway, and he looks at me and says, Roland, they killed him. God damn it, they killed him. What? Killed who? Dilks. The bastards killed him. It seems as though 6 or 7 young juveniles came rushing out of an alleyway in Waikiki. And it was so close you could actually see where Don Ho performs every night. It's right over there. They came out with butterfly knives and switchblades. They cut up 4 of my other friends quite severely. They hit Dilks in the heart and cut the bottom of his heart right off. Witnesses say he ran about 100 yards and bled out completely on the sidewalk. We haven't even gotten to Vietnam yet, and I've lost my best friend. So, by 0100, every single soldier and sailor on the Hawaiian Islands was back at their bases, and they closed it down because there was no juvenile legal system on the islands at that time. They walked free, would never receive punishment. A few days later, we're near Guam, and because I'm in the intelligence business, we're playing hide and seek with 3 Soviet Badger bombers. And that was kind of fun and distracting from what had happened. 30 June, we arrive on Dixie Station and operate there for a while. And on the 8th of July, we move up to Yankee Station. And you know, until I prepared for this event, it never dawned on me that South Vietnam, the waters off South Vietnam, were called Dixie Station. And the waters off North Vietnam were called Yankee Station. So on the 31 of August, not far from there, my commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Tucker, oh, and by the way, in the intervening time, about 11 birds have been shot down. Pilots have been yanked out of the jungle, hanging to a tether cord. They've been dragged off the beach out a mile so they wouldn't get shot to death by the VC. And we've lost 3 birds, and 2 of the pilots are MIA, and they remain so. Lieutenant Commander was shot down in Haiphong Harbor. I planned the mission to get him in. Stuff happens, right? His wingman, Tutors, another lieutenant commander. And see, the RF-8s don't have any guns. They fly just cameras. Supersonic aircraft that fly straight into places that no one else would, and they have no armament. Okay. He's in the harbor. He has broken his spine, but he manages to get into a half-inflated life raft that automatically inflated when he went out. The parachute flares are burning in the water. 30 to 40 Viet Cong are out there in boats, and he's trying to fend them off with his service revolver. Toots, on the meantime, is making multiple passes, strafing them and shooting them, and killing quite a few. The SAR mission people found it to be far too risky to send the chopper in, but Toots is saying, no, you've got to come, you've got to come, you've got to come. And they finally did, and they lifted him out, and he got back to the ship, was returned to the United States because of the broken spine. And many years later, I would fall building my house into the basement and break my spine, and it was his example that moved me to have enough strength and adrenaline to pull myself up out of the basement with no ladder, no steps, no anything. But it was sort of like if you know, Tom Tucker can do it, I can do it, you know. So, true hero. September 15th, cross-deck operations with Brits on their aircraft carrier. That was kind of fun. 16th September, at midnight, we got an SOS distress call from the August Moon. August Moon, you might say, is the daughter of the Eastern Sun Corporation. She's a really heavy-set girl. She's 100,000 tons, and she's carrying 43,000 tons of iron ore. And she's on the Pateros Reef. Well, the Pateros brothers, if you might spell it that way, and you know, another one of the moments you had a minute ago. You know, Neptune. They're out there trying to beat the hell out of August Moon. And she's breaking up. And so much so that the captain and everyone went up to her brow. And from her brow, we sent 3 helicopters from our aircraft carrier. And we arrive on scene shortly thereafter. We start lifting one sailor after another to safety and then back to different ships that had come to the area to her aid. 44 crewmen in all. But in that event, a 65-foot rogue wave came up and smacked one of our helicopters. Just blew it straight down into the ocean. Took a second and a quarter, they think. And Instantly, the helicopter is dragged by the tow a half a mile beyond the ship, and the 3 crewmen of that helicopter popped up into the ocean, and they were recovered. So, everything seemed to go pretty well. We had a good time in Hong Kong, wonderful port. And on 27 October 1966, at 06:30 in the morning, I'm in my intelligence spaces. All the charts are ready for the pilots to come in. We're planning their flight path. And what happened was we just made coffee. We sailors run on coffee, we really do. And I have a love affair with coffee because coffee saved my life. We just filled the 20-pot coffee maker, and it's bubbling away. In walks Lieutenant Cohen, and he checks his charts and everything else, and asks if there are any changes, and I said no. He said, give them hell, and out the door he went. Well, then Marv Covey and Beret comes in. They're my co-workers, and we're all about the same rank. And prior to leaving port, going to firefighting school and that type of thing, I had forced these 2 guys to do blind evacuation drills until they hated me for it. And I couldn't get them to do it anymore. So every once in a while, I'd put a blindfold on and I'd still practice the blind evacuation drill. I still remember it today, out the port door, if you would, it's the type you dog down, watertight door, out the port door, down 3 frames, over 1, up 1, and then there's daylight out onto the sponson. So, practice, practice, practice. I was a Boy Scout, be prepared. The next thing we hear at in the meantime, below us, on the hangar bay, at 07:21, 2 airman apprentices their names are really important, not that important, I'm sorry. They're tossing Mark 25 magnesium parachute flares back and forth to each other. They're supposed to be stowing them in the locker with 700 more of these deadly items. The lanyard of one of them gets caught, drops on the floor, and ignites. Nothing on Earth can put out magnesium except piling sand on top of it and a new substance that came out a few years later. Actually, some of that substance had been over in QB Point and had been stacked up there, but they were too busy sending bombs out so we could raise hell. And they never did get the Purple K out to the fleet. So here we are with a live magnesium flare that's 5 feet long, 3 inches in diameter, and it's just been torched off. When you take and you strike a flare, for those of you who aren't sailors, and you throw it on the ground, how fast that ignites? Well, this is even faster. In a panic, one of these sailors kicks it into the flare locker with the other 700. And he dogs down the door as fast as he can. This locker has 1-inch thick steel walls. And this is happening while we're up. I'm giving you both places. I wasn't a witness to that, but I was there shortly after. 2 minutes after that happened, after it dropped, the door blew open. Hot magnesium belched out and covered the entire hangar bay. And a hangar bay can hold like 30 aircraft, all parked in neat order. It also happens to, at that time, hold probably 3.5 dozen 2,000-pound bombs, various 500-pounders, rockets, and now there's 6,000 pounds of jet fuel that just burst and dropped, didn't ignite yet, dropped onto the hangar bay and is headed toward the bombs. It hasn't ignited. Two sailors grab a hose, a 2-inch line, and they start wetting down and dosing the heavy ordnance. The locker is that's a lost case. But in 3 minutes, the hangar bay, that part of the hangar bay, is 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And ultimately, what put out the fire was it literally burned one deck through the next deck, through the next deck, into the ocean. Watertight integrity all around it is what saved the ship, and hundreds of crewmen and officers who are we all were heroic, and I never ever have used that word till today about myself. In writing this, I realized that there's a moment or two that defines you, and this is kind of one of those moments. So that drill that nobody liked to do, all of a sudden we're trapped. We had doors on both sides because we were in the middle of the ship. So the guys opened one door and black toxic smoke that made you just drop to your knees flowed in from that area. Go to the other door, the same thing. So how are we going to get out of here? It's obvious you can't hold your breath that long. So I had the bright idea of taking our bath towels, because a couple of us slept in that space. It was air conditioned. Come on, it's Vietnam, you know? And dipped the towels in the coffee pot. They're hot as hell. We wring them out, wrapped them around our faces, and exited and got to the outside. Getting to the sponson, I get up on top of the sponson, up on the flight deck, and in the area beneath the flare locker, the steel flight deck is beginning to bubble. Men who run through it, their boots are taking and getting on fire. Down in the hangar bay, these brilliant young sailors, 5 or more of them, approach the area of where the bombs are when it exploded one more time. This time, it sent a fireball all the way into the back of hangar bay 2, but we had already closed the big doors between hangar bay 2 and 3. Huge cables that are bigger than your arm, electric cables, are snapping and bouncing off all those steel bulkheads all through hangar bay 1 and 2. Everyone had gone to general quarters and done a superb job. What I heard at that time was something that goes like this. General quarters, man your battle stations. And then you heard this bell. Bong, 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 bong. General quarters, right? Okay. This is no drill. It's never said that way. This is not a drill, is the way it's always been said. This time, whoever was on the bridge said, "This is no drill. This is no drill. Fire in Alpha 107 Mike." And when we were in the spaces, that meant, oh my God, it's a magazine. I didn't know what magazine. That wasn't my business. But I knew a magazine was on fire. And we had a big rubber mat because we did a lot of standing on those steel decks. So I reached down and pulled the mat back because underneath there I discovered there was a hole about 1.5 inches. I lifted up the mat just when that fireball went across the top of the ceiling, and the flame blew up through it like you'd ignited an oxygen torch about 2.5 feet. Whoop, down the mat went. And all 3 of us knew we were in desperate trouble. The first chore we had to do was take care of all the top secret and secure it. And then the towels and the coffee and out of there. Get up on the flight deck, like I started to say. And the next thing you know is, what am I going to do? I mean, there was a bunch of lines, hoses already running over to a space above the magazine, and that's where our berthing quarters were. So my shipmates in the detachment from Light Photon 63 lived there. I didn't sleep there because I had air-conditioned spaces. But did they get out alive? Well, in the end, we lost 44 dead, 38 And witnessing this stuff was really hard. Severely burned. Triage is going on the flight deck aft a little bit. The dead bodies are there. I had to cross over past that. I get down into where the berthing spaces are, and they're putting together a fire team. And all this has happened in less than 6-7 minutes. I put on an oxygen breathing apparatus. Today, firemen have much more sophisticated equipment. And I headed in on a rescue team, and I'm second man on a 2-inch hose. My job is to control it. Pitch black. If you touch the walls, you would burn the sleeve of your jacket. It would be like, shh. And it's just stupefying heat in there. I've never experienced anything like that. Like throwing into a volcano, I guess. I don't know. I'm in about 9 frames, and my oxygen breathing equipment quits. So if you're a diver, like someone was, the first thing that happens when you try to take a breath and your gear is quit is it sucks in, and it's already suffocating you anyway. So your brain says, okay, cool, be cool, you know. So you can't breathe out, you can't breathe in. Try to breathe in one more time. Well, guess what, folks? The next thing you do is you tear the effing thing right off your face. The toxic gases in the smoke that you know, magnesium and everything else burning, dropped me straight to my knees immediately. It just went right straight down. I could feel it searing the lungs and the vocal cords. Grabbed hold of the fire hose and tried to make my way back through. I got just about a frame because I could see daylight from the entrance opening when I was overcome, and I fell right there in a bunch of foam. And other sailors grabbed my arms and pulled me out onto the gun tub. Now, while I'm in the gun tub laying in this foam, I vomited and all that. I look around, and guys are taking these huge shells from the anti-aircraft guns and passing them right over the top of me. It's like, stay there, buddy, you know. So I pulled myself together. I got up. I grabbed another oxygen breathing apparatus, and I asked the bosun first class that was there. I said, is this one going to work, goddammit? And he says, it doesn't matter, you're not going back in. And he refused to let me get in. From that point, I wandered out toward elevator 1 where they were dumping helicopters over the side and dumping all these bombs over. And if you can try to imagine what it's like to witness young sailors who have no stake in this at all, except we're all on the same little planet at this time, grabbing bombs and throwing them, literally throwing them over the side. Superhuman strength being exhibited that you would never possess elsewhere, any other way. And so then, 7 hours later, we had men trapped way down below. Took hours to reach them. Their skin had been burned off their bodies. They were in little tiny cramped spaces. They're running out of air. The captain had to tell a group of guys that were in the public affairs office that he was going to completely flood every compartment all the way around them and hope to see you on the other side. And they flooded the whole area. That's a command decision. They did not get out. Other guys did get out. And there were all these amazing, heroic stories going on everywhere at the same time. And we head from at that point back to Subic Bay, and we had an honors thing. The flag had been dropped to half staff, and we're limping out of there. Oh, by the way, the Oriskany, which is an 880-foot-long vessel, angle deck carrier, was within 1 minute of the old man calling abandoned ship with 5,300 guys on board. She was listed so bad before the pumps finally stabilized her. The next thing is we're all in dress whites, and we're watching endless lines of flag-covered shipmates going down the gangplank, being carried and loaded straight onto aircraft on the pier, because it's a huge naval facility, and they can do that. And they were put into the aircraft and flown back to the States. 1 week later, 3 destroyers in our carrier heading back to America come to almost a dead stop. Lieutenant Commander Omar Ford had wanted to be buried at sea. So everybody is back out in full dress uniform, color guard, bugler, everybody. And what he did was, there's a thing in the Navy that's called the last watch, and it's a symbolic ringing of the bell when your watch is over, and his was. So as they lifted the board from horizontal to 45 degrees, you heard the bell ring twice. 3 times. A 21 gun salute, and then the bugler played taps. And it took me over 30 years to be able to be present when taps is played without losing it. So that's my salty sea tale.